Testicles 1 2. All right, dudes. So we've got a show date coming up. It's set, you know. I just don't. We're kind of looking at January to February of a show date, show run, month long. Work needs to be in London by early December, which means that we've got 2 months to make a show. So needless to say, we've got a deadline fast approaching. So now we are going to switch from what I like to call slow mode into go mode. Now, slow mode is in between shows, prioritizes experimentation, fleshing out, you know, other work, continuing also to expand on our current series that we have, you know, but it's more at a there's a little more leisure to the pace, and we're prioritizing discovery. We're prioritizing discovery over productivity. If I could, if you know, yeah, it's probably the best way to say it. We're looking to dig, and it's about exploration, experimentation, unearthing new things, and discovery. Go mode is we've got a show coming up, we've got a deadline, we've got a project, we know what we have to do, and now it's time to just get it done. Now, go mode prioritizes productivity over leisure and pace, and it prioritizes productivity. I think I said that already, but it's yes. So go mode, it's all about meeting a deadline and getting the work done, right? So you can't operate on go mode 100% of the time, because you need time to find new things out. You know, it's like the same. It's like it's kind of, you can look at it like the same difference between a bulk and a cut, right? You know, when you're bulking, you're a little softer. You're taking more calories in, and when you're cutting, it's only what needs to be there, and it's efficient. So right now we're cutting. This is a cutting season, and so I've got 2 months. Generally, the gallery requires 15 paintings at a minimum, which is a healthy goal for a show. So 15 to 20 is like the standard range. And so today, what I'm going to do in the studio is I'm going to finish up the painting that I've got going, the one that we worked on yesterday. And after that, I'm going to start working on new reference images for the upcoming show. And so the show is going to be focused on the Practice Makes Perfect series, the tennis cat paintings. And so we're going to be expounding on that and trying to see how we can make variations of it that are cohesive but also exciting. And this is kind of one of those things that we talked about, you know, as far as working serially. You know, when you have to do it, it's best to do it in a way that is generative and fun, and also make some room for discovery and experimentation, right? Because you don't want to have just the same kind of thing over and over. You want a thread through it, but you also want some excitement and some room between each. Now, some of the things that are going to be standard across the board, and one of the things that makes this show very doable in the strict amount of time that we have, one thing is the fact that I thrive in this in go mode. I thrive on the deadline. I thrive on the pressure. So to me, this is just very exciting. To me, as soon as I got the email, as soon as I got the word, you know, there's like a little fire that started, and it's like, you know, I get this little rumble, and that's really going to carry me through. And so I'm really good at, you know, putting in the long hours in this time, precisely because I've been taking time outside of it to rest my mind and get my body in the right place to have to push, right? The other thing that's going to make this show very doable is the images themselves, the nature of the tennis court and the kind of context that they're in. The tennis court is usually just like a flat background color with, you know, a little bit of value variation, but it's not as involved, let's say, as the nest paintings, which were incredibly tedious and there was just objects everywhere. There's more expansive, you know, fields of color, which is just the court itself, and then the main characters really are the shadows, because that's kind of where the activity takes place. It's the relationship between the shadow of the cat and then the tennis player, obviously. So the tennis player as well as the main character, but the tennis player is going to be the part that just takes up the most, right? That's going to be the portion of the painting that requires the most attention, but relative to an entire canvas, it's pretty small. So I'm going to get in today. I'm going to wrap up the one that I've got, and then I'm going to show you how I compose references using Photoshop, and now you know, using tools like even Photoshop Beta to generate new things within the picture frame. So I'm excited to do that, and we're also going to have to come up with a new schedule for the next 2 months that's going to give us the time to get in the studio and get all the work done that we need to get, as well as editing afterwards, because I don't plan on easing up on the editing during this time. I plan on staying consistent and documenting this entire process. And we also need time to get into the gym every day. And that's going to be, you know, just the 3 things that I've got going on in my life are painting, YouTube, and the gym now. So I just need to make sure that all those 3 things are met, you know, starting with the studio and then editing and then the gym. But the gym will probably be done in the mornings, because I'm realizing, like I said before, I can get it out of the way. It's the hardest thing I do, and it kind of really sets me up for success for the rest of the day. So that's going to be my workload for today, is finishing the piece, composing new images, and starting to construct a schedule. And that's all I've got for now, so let's get to work. So this last day was pretty straightforward. I'm working on the shadows, and I was having a little bit of trouble getting the exact tone right. I had gone just a little bit too dark the first time around, so I tried to go a little bit lighter, and then I ended up going a little bit too light, but eventually came around and corrected it. Here, the kind of layering up, you can see the subtle difference, but it's not too dramatic. Now, as I've mentioned before with the cat, one of the things that we wanted to do is make sure that the shadows were getting blurrier the further away that they got from the object. So I slowed the video down here a little bit just to give you guys an idea of how I go about doing that. Essentially, it's as simple as painting the 2 colors next to each other, just butting them right up, and then taking a brush and just kind of dragging it along the edge. And you'll see that, you know, you do that a couple of times and it's going to diminish that hard line that you get between the 2 colors. And in its place, you'll kind of get this little thin band of color that is a pretty equal mixture between your dark and your light, or whichever 2 colors you happen to have next to each other. And so for this, I'm just kind of doing this across the contour of the whole cat, and making sure that you know, that it's not uneven, but at the same time, you know, I'm not being too precious about it, because it's a shadow, so there's going to be a little bit of you know, chaos to it, and we want to you know, just make sure that, most importantly, that the line is just not sharp. I usually end up going over it just kind of a couple of times just to make sure that it's you know, pretty well diminished. And I'm gonna go back in and do the same with, you know, the tennis racket and the hand and the ponytail. You see that kind of loose little thread kind of peeking out of the close to the elbow, and that's a ponytail with you know, a little bit of a bunch of hair at the end of it. So I'll go in and blur that the same way. And here I'm just making sure that I don't blur too far out, because what can happen is your image can kind of get really fat, you know, if you blur it outward too much. So you want to make sure that you do have a little radius that you're sticking within. And then here back to the time lapse, I'm just again going across the border of, or the contour of the whole image, and choosing where it is that I need to blur. You're here addressing the little ponytail there, but over towards the figure, everything is going to stay pretty sharp. And once I've got the whole border in, I'm just going to fill in the entire background. One thing I wanted to make a note of is beware that if you're thinning your paint with odorless mineral spirits, you are going to temporarily get a lighter version of the value that you're painting. So when I mix this and test it against the actual color without any sort of medium in it, it's the exact same color. But when I add odorless mineral spirits, it lightens up and then darkens as the mineral spirits dry out. What's going on, dudes? So we're going to be composing some reference for our new show. So the first thing I'm going to do is open up my reference bank here. As you can see, I've got plenty of these tennis dudes to choose from, so it's going to be a pretty exciting show. This is the one that I'm going to work on right now. I've liked this image for a good bit. The gesture is pretty perfect and the ball's in a great place. And it's just sort of got a good example of everything that I like about these images. So I've got two Photoshop programs here going. I've got regular Photoshop and then I've got the beta. And I'm gonna open this one up in beta. So the first thing I wanna do is just make a duplicate of my image here, just so that everything, all the changes that I make are non-destructive, which basically just means that I can go back and have an original copy of what I'm making. Next thing I'm doing is I'm using the Photoshop healing brush tool to manually remove the ball, but since I made a copy, you know, I can toggle on and off and always look back at the placement, which I'm going to need to refer to in a little bit anyway. Next thing, I'm just going to come back over here to my reference bank and I'm going to open up this cat image, place him in, plop him right in, and then I'm going to cut him out via duplicate or via copy, and then I'm going to make a duplicate of that copy. And next thing I want to do is toggle the ball back on, and then I'm going to do a color overlay on the cat. Now with the color overlay, basically, as you can see, is anything that I select, it's going to make the cat that color. So what we want is for him to be the color of the ball, since he's basically going to be replacing it. The next thing I'm going to do is give myself the option to work in multiple amounts of scales. So I'm using Photoshop's generative expand feature to fill in the sides of this composition. And here you can see it's loading up, it's generating, and hopefully should give me a pretty good result. Kind of iffy, right? There's a couple of little artifacts here, but we can go through variations. Actually, the second variation looks a lot better, so we're going to go with that one. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my cat image again, and we're going to bring him over here closer to the ball. And as you can see, he kind of disappears behind this layer, so we're going to move him above. We're going to move him above the generative expand layer. And then I'm going to just kind of tweak his position a little bit, just to make him look a little bit more dynamic. And then we're going to adjust his scale. And then in order to make him look like he's a part of this picture plane here, we need to give him a little bit of a tilt. So I'm going to go to Edit, Transform, Perspective. And we are going to just bring him out a little bit right here. And as you can see, it's a slight tweak, but it makes a pretty big difference. Again, I'm doing another little scale adjustment. And the last thing I want to do is come over here, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit and give him a bit of a blur. So we're going filter, blur, Gaussian blur. And with this, you know, obviously we want him to match up with what's going on in the scene. And as you can see, the closer the shadow gets to the figure, the sharper it is. The further it moves away, the more blurred it becomes. And that's just simply because the object is far away from the shadow. So with the ball, it's going to be up in the air, just matching up with her eye line. So we want to make sure that the blur of the cat is matching up with the blur of the ball. This is a little bit too much at 4.7, so we're going to bring it down, try 2.5. That looks pretty perfect to me. And I'm going to hit enter just to solidify that change. And as you can see, it's still a little bit too big for what it is. So again, I'm going to bring it back down with some scale and just place them right over the ball just to see how that looks. And then I can toggle the ball off and see that he's gone. And taking a closer look at it here, that to me looks pretty perfect. So I'm going to call this one done. Now, while this one might be finished, I've still got a pretty big grip of them to make because it's going to be essentially the entire solo show. Now, with the others, I'm probably going to use similar images of the cat. I might use the exact same image of the cat. I might find some more, and I might generate some more in Photoshop. And when I do, I'll definitely show you guys those variations. But for today, I just wanted to give you a quick idea of how I go about making these reference images, and this is a pretty good example. Now, the videos over the next 2 months are going to be, I think, pretty strictly dedicated towards this solo show prep and everything that goes into it. And to say that I'm very excited to show you would be a massive understatement. This is probably, you know, go time is the most exciting part of, one of the most exciting parts of my practice, aside from the random acts of discovery that I make in the studio. Everything that to me is probably the most exciting, and then just starting to get things ready for a show is the second most exciting. So I'm very much looking forward to showing you guys this entire process, and I hope you stick around, and I hope that you're getting something informative out of it. Have a good night.